But first, this Mark Zuckerberg story. What do you make of Zuckerberg's comments pushing back on the president? And also, do you believe that they were anti-Trump during the election?
Look, I think the president has to distinguish between Facebook as an institution and Facebook as a corporation. Zuckerberg may or may not be pro-Trump, but the fact is the Trump campaign relied more on Twitter and Facebook than any campaign in history. There's a little bit of ingratitude there. I mean, look at the number of millions of people that President Trump reaches every morning for free, by the way, by using Facebook and Twitter. So they may have corporations that are more liberal. They're based in California. That seems to be the norm in that part of the world. But I think the effect of Facebook, if I were Hillary Clinton, I would figure Facebook was a huge net advantage for Donald Trump because it let him mobilize and reach millions of people. He was turning out those huge rallies by sending Facebook and Twitter messages at zero cost. So I think there's a difference between the structures, which are really open to anybody clever enough to create an audience, and the corporate leadership, which, I think it's fair to say Zuckerberg's probably a liberal Democrat, or certainly a liberal independent, compared to Donald Trump. But I don't think Zuckerberg's personal intervention was a problem. If it was, Trump couldn't have won because Facebook was central to the Trump campaign.
Yeah. But, Mr. Speaker, it's Dagan McDowell. Will you admit, though, the way that we digest news in this day and age and receive news, that it is being manipulated by these social media companies? We found out that conservative news at Facebook was not being promoted, and then they started doing a tap dance about it because they were caught off guard and blamed the algorithms in part. Right. But this is going to be a growing issue where they could, sure, as they get more power, decide what you get to see and read.
Well, I think both Facebook and Google are going to be ultimately under congressional scrutiny. They're going to be looked at carefully. They're too big. They're too powerful. They're too pervasive in our lives. We've always gone through this. When the railroads were that powerful in the 1880s and 90s, we began to look at them from a government standpoint. When Standard Oil and U.S. Steel got that powerful, we had to look at them. When AT&T was that powerful, it was the government which broke it up and created the environment that led to cell phone technology. So I think we've had long sweeps of this. Clearly, the bias of the people who work in Silicon Valley is somewhere between liberal and socialist. They love Bernie Sanders. They could tolerate Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump was not their favorite friend. And I think you have to watch and say to them, one of the ground rules is you got to be neutral in your algorithms. You cannot be covertly trying to brainwash the country. And that is a challenge. And I think even Zuckerberg's people admitted it last year, that they had done some things that weren't defensible.
Mr. Speaker, we want to switch gears to taxes. Take us behind the curtain here. What do you think is going on as a former Speaker of the House in terms of the debate going on right now and whether or not this passes?
Well, I think it will pass. I think that they've learned, the combined White House, House, Senate team have learned a lot from the problems they had with health care. They have really stuck to the same message. They've worked together for months now. The tax bill is a pretty good starting point. It has a big small business component, which I like very much. It's a huge break for the middle class. It's ironic to me that some of the interest groups who are mad, think about this, they're mad because we are doubling the deduction so people will actually have their own money and they will get to spend it without having to use the favorite deduction of interest groups. I think that is a dead loser. So there are two arguments here. You had one at the beginning of the show. One is you like 3.1% growth. How'd you like to go to 5 or 6? Then you're for the tax cuts. You'd rather have a lot smaller economy with Washington bureaucrats in charge. Then you're against the tax cuts. You want to drain the swamp? The tax cuts keep the money away from the swamp. You want to keep the swamp big and healthy, then be against the tax cuts. The Democrats, I think, are very likely to split, and I think you will presently see some Democrats start to say, well, there ought to be a way to vote for a tax cut. We ought to be able to find a bipartisan tax cut. I think there are a lot of these states where they can't go home and be in favor of higher taxes, bigger government, and you personally not getting an advantage. And the small business tax cut may become the most important single political driver because it's the biggest, it's a 40% tax cut for small businesses, and that's a huge incentive to call your congressman and your senator.
Yeah, and we're looking at these pictures from Uganda. Lawmakers in Uganda, the parliament there, brawled for the second day to protest a bill that would change their constitution. This bill would change the extension of the president's rule, letting him run in for re-election. Parliament members kicked, punched, used microphone stands as weapons. Wow. I mean, I thought it was bad in Washington. At least you don't see this here. Your reaction to this?
I was going to say, well, first of all, we thought we had partisanship. I always remind people that the musical Hamilton, which is terrific, is about an American Secretary of the Treasury being shot by an American vice president. We haven't had that happen in over 200 years.
Yeah.
So I think our partisanship's real, but it's a long, long way from what you're seeing in Uganda.
Yeah, Lee Carter, jump in here because you've been critical of this administration on their messaging. Are they messaging this tax plan right?
I think they are messaging this tax plan very, very well. But what I do think they need to do better prepare for about the income inequality and the wealth issues.
Newt messaged it better.
He did, absolutely.
Good messaging there. Great to see you, sir.